A young teacher named Rachel shared the photo with her students' parents, explaining how it showed the importance of being there for each other during difficult times. She said it was a perfect example of how love and support could help people through their most vulnerable moments. Military families across the country felt especially connected to what they had witnessed. Sarah, whose husband was currently deployed overseas, wrote that seeing William's emotion made her feel less alone in her own fears and worries. She said it showed that even princes understood what military families went through every day. The response on social media was overwhelmingly positive. People praised William for showing genuine emotion and vulnerability. They admired Catherine for her instinctive, supportive response. Many commented that this was what real leadership looked like, caring about people and not being afraid to show it. News programs across the country featured the story as their top headline. Television presenters spoke about how rare it was to see such authentic emotion from members of the royal family. Royal experts explained that this kind of genuine public display of vulnerability was unusual but very powerful. Veterans organizations reported that their phones began ringing constantly with calls from young people wanting to volunteer. The images of William and Catherine connecting so deeply with veterans had inspired others to find ways to support military families and wounded soldiers. Military charities saw a massive increase in donations. People who had been moved by what they witnessed wanted to do something concrete to help. Online donation pages crashed because so many people were trying to give money at the same time. The memorial itself became a pilgrimage site overnight. Hundreds of people who had seen the news coverage decided to visit the memorial themselves. They'd brought flowers, photographs, and personal notes to leave at the wall. Many said they wanted to experience the same sense of connection and remembrance that they had witnessed in William and Catherine. Local florists near the memorial ran out of flowers as people streamed in to buy bouquets to place at the memorial wall. Hotel bookings in the area increased dramatically as people traveled from far away to pay their respects. School teachers across the country began planning field trips to the memorial. They'd wanted their students to learn about sacrifice and service in the same way that the children William and Catherine had met were learning. Educational materials about military history and remembrance saw increased demand. The photograph of William and Catherine at the memorial wall was printed on the front pages of newspapers in dozens of countries. International media praised the British royal family for showing such authentic leadership and connection with their people. Letters began pouring into Buckingham Palace from ordinary citizens expressing their appreciation for what William and Catherine had done. Elderly veterans wrote to thank them for honoring fallen soldiers. Military wives thanked Catherine for showing how to support a spouse through difficult emotions. Margaret, the elderly mother who had shared her son's photograph with Catherine, received hundreds of letters from strangers who had been moved by her story. People wanted to thank her for her sacrifice and to let her know that her son would not be forgotten. David, the veteran who had lost his leg, wrote a blog post about his conversation with William and Catherine. His story was shared thousands of times and inspired other injured veterans to share their own experiences of recovery and hope. The children who had met William and Catherine became local celebrities in their schools. Emma, who had given William the flower, was interviewed by local television stations. She said she was happy that she had been able to help the prince feel better. Months later, surveys showed that public approval ratings for the royal family had reached historic highs. People felt that William and Catherine had shown what modern monarchy could look like: authentic, caring, and connected to ordinary people's lives and struggles. The visit to the memorial had achieved something that no amount of formal royal protocol could have accomplished. It had shown that the royal family understood and shared the emotions and experiences of the people they served. It had created a moment of national unity built on shared values of remembrance, sacrifice, and mutual support. Years later, historians would point to this visit as a turning point in how the British people viewed their royal family. It had transformed them from distant figures performing ceremonial duties into real people who genuinely cared about others and were not afraid to show their own humanity and vulnerability. In the photograph, both William and Catherine looked completely natural and unguarded. This was not a posed royal portrait with forced smiles and perfect posture. This was a captured moment of two people sharing a profound experience of remembrance and emotion. The image showed small details that made it even more powerful. Catherine's hat was slightly tilted from the wind. William's military medals caught the light and gleamed against his dark uniform. The names on the memorial wall behind them were clearly visible, creating a backdrop that explained the entire story. Other photographers were also taking pictures, but James knew that his shot was the one that would become historic. He had captured not just a moment in time, but the essence of what the entire day had been about. Love, support, sacrifice, and the importance of remembering those who had given their lives for others. When James looked at the photo later on his camera screen, he felt tears coming to his own eyes. The image was so powerful and moving that it affected him emotionally, even though he had been photographing the scene as it happened. The photo showed that William and Catherine were not just performing royal duties. They were genuinely moved by what they had experienced. They truly cared about the families they had met and the stories they had heard. Their emotion was real and their connection to the memorial was authentic. James knew that this photograph would be published on front pages of newspapers around the world. It would be shared millions of times on social media. It would become one of the defining images of William and Catherine's public service. But more than that, the photograph would serve as a reminder of what leadership could look like. It showed that true leaders were not afraid to show vulnerability and emotion. It demonstrated that caring about others and being moved by their stories was a sign of strength, not weakness. The image captured the moment when William and Catherine had connected most deeply with the people they served. It showed them not as distant royal figures, but as caring human beings who understood loss and grief, and the importance of supporting one another through difficult times. Years later, people would look back at this photograph and remember not just what William and Catherine looked like on that day, but how they had made everyone feel. They had shown that compassion and vulnerability could bring people together across all social boundaries. The lasting image became a symbol of hope and healing. It reminded people that even in times of great loss and sadness, there was comfort to be found in human connection and mutual support. It showed that love could help people through their darkest moments, and that no one had to face their grief alone. Part 9. The nation's response. Within hours of William and Catherine leaving the memorial, the photographs and videos from their visit began appearing on news websites and social media platforms around the world. The image of Catherine comforting William at the memorial wall spread rapidly across the internet, touching hearts in every corner of the nation. People immediately began sharing the photos with their own comments and reactions. A grandmother named Helen posted on her social media account, saying that seeing Catherine support William reminded her of how she had comforted her own husband when they visited war graves in France. The image brought back memories of their own experiences with loss and healing. William talked about the importance of remembrance. He said that the dead could only truly die if they were forgotten. As long as people continued to visit memorials like this one and share stories about the fallen, their spirits would live on. Their sacrifice would continue to have meaning. He spoke about the responsibility that living people had to make the most of the freedom that had been bought with such a high price. Every day that people could live in peace and safety was a gift from those who had died protecting their country. Catherine reached over and briefly touched William's arm when she saw that his emotions were threatening to overwhelm him. Her gentle touch reminded him that she was there supporting him. It gave him the strength to continue. William concluded his speech by asking everyone to take a moment of silence to honor all those who had died in service to their country. The entire crowd bowed their heads respectfully. The silence was so complete that the only sound was the wind rustling through the bare tree branches. When the moment of silence ended, people began to applaud. But it was not the usual polite clapping that often followed royal speeches. This applause came from the heart. It was filled with genuine appreciation for William's honesty and vulnerability. Many people in the crowd later said that William's spontaneous speech was the most moving thing they had ever heard from any public figure. It felt authentic and personal rather than rehearsed and political. It showed that he truly cared about the people he had met and the stories they had shared. After William finished his heartfelt speech, He and Catherine walked back to the memorial wall one final time. They wanted to pay their respects privately before leaving. The crowd gave them space, understanding that this was a personal moment for the royal couple. They stood together in front of the wall of names, looking up at the thousands of carved letters that represented so many lost lives. William found Robert Hayes' name again and stared at it quietly. Catherine stood close beside him, her presence offering comfort and strength. The photographers who had been following their visit throughout the day positioned themselves at a respectful distance. They knew that they were witnessing something special, and they wanted to capture it properly. But they also understood the importance of not intruding on such a sacred moment. One photographer named James had been covering royal events for over 20 years. He had taken thousands of pictures of William and Catherine at various official functions, but he had never seen them quite like this. Their usual composed royal demeanor had been replaced by genuine human emotion and vulnerability. James raised his camera and began taking pictures. Through his lens, he could see the way Catherine's hand rested protectively on William's arm. He could see how they leaned slightly toward each other for mutual support. He could see the genuine sorrow and respect written on both of their faces. The light was perfect for photography. The gray autumn sky created a soft, natural lighting that made everything look both beautiful and melancholy. The bare tree branches in the background added to the solemn atmosphere. The memorial wall itself provided a powerful backdrop that spoke of sacrifice and remembrance. James took dozens of photos, but he knew that one in particular was special. It showed William and Catherine standing side by side with their heads bowed in respect. Catherine's protective hand was clearly visible on William's arm. Their body language spoke of love, support, and shared grief. One little boy named Jamie said he wanted to be a soldier when he grew up, so he could help protect people too. Catherine gently explained that there were many ways to help and protect others. Teachers protected children by helping them learn. Doctors protected people by keeping them healthy. Even ordinary citizens protected others by being kind and helping their neighbors. The children spent almost an hour talking with William and Catherine. They asked about the royal family and what it was like to live in a palace. They wanted to know if William and Catherine had children of their own. They were curious about everything from the royal dogs to what the couple ate for breakfast. As their official visit was coming to an end, William looked around at all the people who had gathered at the memorial. He saw the families who had shared their stories of loss. He saw the veterans who had shown such courage and strength. He saw the children who had asked such thoughtful questions. Something stirred deep inside his heart. William walked over to where his security team was standing. He asked them if it would be possible for him to address the crowd. This was not part of the planned schedule. No speech had been written in advance. There was no podium or microphone set up. But William felt strongly that he needed to say something to these special people. His security team quickly spoke into their radios. They contacted the memorial staff to see if this would be possible. Within minutes, they had arranged for a small portable microphone to be brought over. Word spread quickly through the crowd that William wanted to speak to them. People began to gather in a large circle around where William was standing. Catherine moved to stand beside him, offering her quiet support. She could see that her husband was feeling emotional, but she also knew that he had something important he needed to share. William had given hundreds of speeches during his years as a member of the royal family, but this felt different. This was not a formal occasion with prepared remarks written by professional speechwriters. This was coming straight from his heart, based on what he had experienced that day. He began by thanking everyone for sharing their stories with him and Catherine. He said that meeting the families of fallen soldiers had been both heartbreaking and inspiring. Their love for their lost family members was so strong that it filled the entire memorial with warmth despite the cold autumn day. William's voice was strong at first, but as he continued talking, it began to waver with emotion. He spoke about the veterans he had met and how amazed he was by their resilience and determination. Despite facing terrible injuries and trauma, they have found ways to rebuild their lives and help others. He talked about the children and their innocent but profound questions. He said that their curiosity and caring gave him hope for the future. If the next generation could grow up understanding the importance of service and sacrifice, then the world would be a better place. Catherine watched her husband with obvious pride. She could see how much this day had affected him. She could also see how his words were touching everyone in the crowd. People were nodding their heads in agreement. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. William's voice broke slightly as he talked about seeing Robert Hayes' name on the memorial wall. He explained that Robert had been someone he knew indirectly through mutual friends in the military. Learning about Robert's brave final actions had reminded him of why memorials like this one were so important. He said that it was easy for people to think of war casualties as just numbers or statistics. But every name on that wall represented a real person with hopes and dreams, and people who loved them. Every name belonged to someone who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their country and their fellow citizens. The crowd listened in complete silence as William continued his unplanned speech. Even the children who had been fidgeting earlier stood perfectly still. Everyone could sense that they were hearing something rare and genuine from a member of the royal family. As William and Catherine continued their visit, they came to an area where a group of school children were waiting. These children were between 7 and 12 years old. They had come to the memorial with their teachers to learn about remembrance and the importance of honoring those who had died in service to their country. The children were sitting quietly on the grass in a circle. They wore their school uniforms and looked very serious. Their teacher, Mrs. Johnson, had explained to them that they would meet important visitors today. She had told them to be respectful and polite. When William and Catherine approached, the children immediately stood up. Some of them looked nervous. Others seemed excited. A few of the younger ones hid behind their friends. Meeting real royalty was not something that happened every day in their lives. Catherine knelt down so she was at the same height as the children. William sat on a small wall nearby. They both smiled warmly at the young faces looking back at them. The children began to relax when they saw how friendly and approachable the royal couple appeared to be. A brave little girl named Emma raised her hand. She had curly red hair and freckles on her nose. Emma was only 7 years old, but she was very curious about the world around her. Her teacher nodded to let her know it was okay to ask her question. "Why do people have to die in wars?" Emma asked in a small voice. Her question was simple, but it carried the weight of centuries of human conflict. It was the kind of question that adults often struggle to answer. It went to the heart of why memorials like this one existed. William looked at Emma thoughtfully. He could see the genuine confusion and sadness in her young eyes. She really wanted to understand why the world could be such a difficult and painful place sometimes. He knew he needed to give her an answer that was honest but not too frightening for a child her age. William knelt down next to Catherine so he could speak directly to Emma and the other children. "Sometimes," he said in a gentle voice, "there are people in the world who want to hurt others or take things that do not belong to them. When this happens, brave men and women choose to protect people who cannot protect themselves." He explained that soldiers were like the ultimate helpers. They were people who were willing to put themselves in danger to keep others safe. Just like firefighters ran toward burning buildings and police officers faced dangerous criminal, soldiers faced enemies who threatened their country and their people. Catherine added that while it was very sad when people died in wars, it was important to remember that they had chosen to make this sacrifice. They had decided that protecting others was more important than keeping themselves safe. This made them heroes worthy of respect and remembrance. Another child named Michael raised his hand. He was 10 years old and wore glasses that made his eyes look very big. Michael wanted to know if the soldiers had been scared when they went to fight. He wondered if brave people ever felt afraid. William smiled at this excellent question. He told Michael that being brave did not mean never feeling scared. Actually, brave people often felt very frightened, but they did their job anyway. Fear was a normal human emotion that helped keep people alive by making them careful and alert. He shared that during his own time as a military pilot he had felt scared many times. When he flew rescue missions in dangerous weather or over rough terrain, his heart would beat fast and his hands would sweat. But he did his job anyway because people needed his help. Emma had been listening carefully to everything William and Catherine said. Suddenly, she stood up and walked over to a small flower bed nearby. She picked a yellow daisy that was growing there. She walked back to William and held out the flower to him. "This is to help you feel better," she said in her sweet child's voice. "I saw you crying at the wall. My mommy gives me flowers when I am sad, and they always make me feel happy again." William's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and joy. He accepted the small flower from Emma and held it carefully in his large hands. He told her that it was the most beautiful flower he had ever received, and that he would treasure it always. The other children began to gather around William and Catherine. They wanted to share their own thoughts and feelings about what they had learned that day. Some talked about their grandfathers who had been soldiers. Others mentioned family friends who were currently serving in the military. After the emotional moment at the memorial wall, William and Catherine walked toward a group of veterans who were waiting to meet them. These were men and women who had served in the military and survived. Some of them had been injured during their service. Others had returned home safely but carried invisible wounds in their hearts and minds. The first veteran they met was a young man named David. He was only 28 years old, but he looked older than his years. David was sitting in a wheelchair because he had lost his right leg in an explosion during his military service. Despite his injury, David had a warm smile and bright eyes full of hope. Catherine and William sat down on a bench next to David. They did not stand above him and talk down to him. They made themselves equal to his level. This simple action showed David that they saw him as a person, not just as a disabled veteran. David told them about the day when his life changed forever. He had been walking with his unit when they stepped on a hidden bomb. The explosion was so loud that David could not hear anything for 3 days afterward. When he woke up in the hospital, he discovered that his leg was gone. At first, David felt angry and sorry for himself. He thought his life was over. He believed he would never be able to do the things he loved again. He enjoyed playing soccer and going hiking. He liked to dance at parties and run on the beach. All of these activities seemed impossible now. But David did not give up. He worked hard during his recovery. He learned to walk with a prosthetic leg. He discovered that he could still do many of the things he enjoyed. He even started playing wheelchair basketball and found out he was very good at it. William listened to David's story with great interest. As a former military pilot, William understood the risks that soldiers faced every day. He knew that David was lucky to be alive. Many soldiers who encountered similar explosions did not survive. Catherine asked David about his plans for the future. David's face lit up when he talked about his dreams. He wanted to become a counselor to help other veterans who were struggling with their injuries. He believed that his own experience could help others find hope and strength. David said that losing his leg had actually taught him important lessons about life. He learned that physical strength was not the most important thing. He discovered that mental strength and determination were much more powerful. He realized that helping others gave his life meaning and purpose. The conversation with David lasted much longer than planned. William and Catherine were supposed to meet with him for only 10 minutes, but they stayed with him for over 30 minutes. They were genuinely interested in his story and his recovery journey. Other veterans gathered around to listen to David talk with the royal couple. There was Maria, who had served as a nurse in a field hospital. She had seen many wounded soldiers and had worked long hours to save lives. The stress of her job had given her nightmares that still troubled her years later. There was also Frank, who had been a helicopter pilot like William. Frank had flown dangerous missions to rescue soldiers who were trapped behind enemy lines. He had saved dozens of lives during his military career. Now he worked as a flight instructor, teaching young pilots how to fly safely. William and Catherine listened to each veteran's story with respect and attention. They asked thoughtful questions about their experiences. They wanted to understand what these brave men and women had gone through during their service. The veterans appreciated that William and Catherine treated them as heroes rather than victims. They did not focus only on their injuries or trauma. They also talked about their achievements and their contributions to their country's safety and freedom. One veteran named Susan told them about how she had started a support group for female veterans in her community. Many women who had served in the military felt isolated when they returned home. Susan's group gave them a place to share their experiences and support each other. By the time William and Catherine finished talking with the veterans, both of them felt inspired and humbled. These men and women had given so much to serve their country. Despite their injuries and challenges, they continued to find ways to help others and make their communities better places to live. Catherine's hand stayed on William's back as he gathered his strength. She could feel his breathing slowly becoming normal again. Her touch was gentle but firm. It was her way of saying, "I am here, and you are not alone." This simple gesture spoke louder than any words could have. The crowd around them watched in respectful silence. Many people had tears in their own eyes. They were not just watching a prince show emotion. They were watching a husband and wife support each other during a difficult moment. They were seeing real love in action. An elderly man in the crowd named George had been a soldier 50 years ago. He understood exactly what William was feeling. George had lost many friends during his time in the army. He knew how hard it could be to see their names written in stone. George wiped his own eyes as he watched Catherine comfort her husband. A young mother named Lisa held her daughter's hand tighter. Lisa's own husband was serving overseas in the military. She worried about him every day. Seeing William's emotion made her think about all the families who had said goodbye to their loved ones forever. She was grateful that Catherine knew how to help William through his pain. Catherine did not move away from William until she felt him become steady again. She waited patiently while he took the time he needed. She did not check her watch or look around at the waiting crowd. Her full attention was on her husband and his needs in that moment. William finally lifted his head and looked at Catherine. His eyes were still wet, but he was more composed now. He reached up and briefly touched her hand that was still resting on his back. This small touch was his way of saying thank you. It was his way of showing her how much her support meant to him. The photographers who were there captured this entire moment, but they did it respectfully. They stayed at a distance and did not push forward for closer shots. Even they seemed to understand that they were witnessing something sacred and personal. Catherine slowly moved her hand from William's back, but she stayed close beside him. She was ready to offer comfort again if he needed it. She watched his face carefully to make sure he was okay. Her love and concern for him was obvious to everyone who was watching. William straightened his shoulders and smoothed his uniform. He was ready to continue with their visit. But first he did something that surprised everyone. He turned back to the wall and placed his own hand on Robert Hayes' name. He closed his eyes for a moment as if he was saying a prayer or making a promise. When William opened his eyes again, he looked stronger. Catherine's support had given him the courage he needed to continue. Together, they turned away from the memorial wall and walked toward the next group of people who were waiting to meet them. The crowd began to move again. People started talking quietly among themselves. But the mood had changed. Everyone felt like they had just witnessed something very special. They had seen that even princes and princesses were human beings with real feelings and emotions. Many people in the crowd later said that this moment changed how they felt about the royal family. They realized that William and Catherine were not just figureheads who smiled and waved. They were real people who cared deeply about others. They were people who understood loss and grief and the importance of remembering those who had died. Social media immediately began buzzing with posts about what had happened. People shared photos and videos of Catherine's comforting gesture. They wrote about how moved they were by William's genuine emotion. They praised Catherine for being such a supportive wife and partner. The moment became a symbol of how love and support can help us through our darkest times. It showed that vulnerability is not weakness. It demonstrated that asking for help and accepting comfort from others is actually a sign of strength. As William and Catherine walked away from the memorial wall, they both knew that this moment would stay with them forever. It had brought them closer together as a couple. It had also connected them more deeply with the people they served and the families who had suffered such great losses. After spending time with the families, William and Catherine walked toward the main memorial wall. This wall was very tall and made of black stone. On it were carved thousands of names in gold letters. Each name belonged to a soldier who had died serving their country. The names were organized by the years when the soldiers died. William walked slowly along the wall reading the names. Catherine stayed close beside him. She could see that this was difficult for her husband. His face looked serious and sad. His eyes moved from name to name. Some names made him pause for a moment. These were names he recognized. Then something unexpected happened. William stopped walking completely. He stood very still in front of one section of the wall. His eyes were fixed on one particular name. The name was Captain Robert Hayes. This name meant something special to William. Catherine noticed that William had stopped moving. She looked at his face and saw that something was wrong. His usual calm expression was changing. His eyes were getting wet with tears. His hands started to shake slightly. This was not normal for William, who was always so controlled in public. Robert Hayes had been a soldier that William knew during his own time in the military. They had not served together directly, but they had friends in common. William remembered hearing stories about Robert. He was a brave captain who always took care of his men. He made sure his soldiers had food and water. He checked on them when they were scared or homesick. Robert had died trying to save other soldiers during a dangerous mission. He could have stayed safe, but he chose to help his men instead. William had heard this story many times. Each time it made him think about courage and sacrifice. Now seeing Robert's name on the wall made everything feel very real. The cameras that were following William and Catherine caught this moment. They saw when William's professional composure started to break down. They saw when his eyes filled with tears. They saw when he had to take a deep breath to control his emotions. This was not something that happened often with members of the royal family. Catherine immediately noticed her husband's distress. She did not hesitate for even 1 second. She stepped closer to William and placed her hand gently on his back. Her touch was soft but strong. She positioned herself slightly in front of him to give him some privacy from the cameras and the watching crowd. The people who were there understood what was happening. They could see that William was having a personal moment of grief. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved closer. Even the children in the crowd stayed quiet. Everyone seemed to know that they were witnessing something important and real. Catherine did not try to hurry William along. She did not whisper for him to pull himself together. She did not worry about what people might think. She simply stood there being his support. Her hand remained steady on his back. Her presence was like a shield protecting him during his vulnerable moment. William took several deep breaths. He closed his eyes for a moment and then opened them again. He looked at Robert's name one more time. Then he slowly turned to look at his wife. In his eyes, Catherine could see gratitude and love. He was thankful that she was there with him. He was grateful for her understanding and support. Catherine gave him a small, encouraging smile. It was the kind of smile that passed between two people who truly knew and loved each other. Without saying any words, she was telling him that it was okay to feel sad. It was okay to show emotion. It was okay to be human, even when the whole world was watching. William and Catherine walked through the memorial gates. The first person they met was an old woman sitting on a wooden bench. Her name was Margaret. She was 80 years old with white hair and kind eyes. In her hand she held a small photograph. The photo showed a young man in army uniform. He was smiling and looked very proud. Margaret stood up slowly when she saw the royal couple coming toward her. Her legs were shaky, but her spirit was strong. She had been coming to this memorial for 15 years. Every month she would sit on the same bench and talk to her son. Her son James had died in a war far from home. He was only 22 years old when he left this world. Catherine noticed Margaret first. She walked over to the elderly woman with gentle steps. William followed behind her. Margaret looked nervous but also excited. She had never met anyone from the royal family before. Her hands trembled as she held the photograph tighter. Catherine knelt down in front of Margaret, even though she was wearing her best dress. She did not care about getting dirty. She only cared about this grieving mother. Catherine looked at the photograph and smiled softly. The young soldier in the picture had bright eyes and a warm smile, just like his mother. "Tell me about your son, Margaret," said Catherine in a quiet voice. Her words were kind and gentle. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. Someone important wanted to hear about her James. Someone cared about her boy who had been gone for so long. "James loved to play football," said Margaret. Her voice was shaky but proud. "He was the best player on his team. Every Sunday he would call me after his games. He would tell me about every goal and every save. When he joined the army, he said he would make me proud. He kept his promise." William listened carefully to every word. He could see his own mother in Margaret's face. He could imagine how much she missed her son. William had served in the military too. He knew the dangers that soldiers faced every day. He knew that mothers worried about their children until they came home safe. More families began to gather around them. There was Sarah, who lost her husband in battle. There was Tom, who lost his brother. There was Maria, who lost her son just like Margaret. Each person had a story to tell. Each person had someone they missed every single day. Catherine and William did not rush. They listened to every story. They looked at every photograph. They asked questions about the people who had died. What did they like to do for fun? What were their dreams? What made them laugh? What made them happy? Sarah showed them a letter her husband had written before he died. In the letter, he told her how much he loved her. He told her to be strong and to take care of their 2 children. Sarah had read this letter 1,000 times, but she still cried every time she shared it with someone new. Tom talked about his younger brother, who wanted to be a teacher. His brother had joined the army to pay for college. He planned to come back and teach children how to read. Tom said his brother would have been the best teacher in the world because he was patient and kind. Maria shared stories about her son who loved to cook. He made the best pasta she had ever tasted. He always said he would open a restaurant when he finished his military service. Maria still cooked his favorite recipes on his birthday every year. William and Catherine spent over an hour with these families. They were supposed to stay for only 15 minutes, but time did not matter. These people mattered. These stories mattered. These memories mattered more than any schedule or plan. The families could see that William and Catherine really cared. This was not just a duty for them. This was personal. This was real. This was from their hearts. The black car moved slowly through the quiet streets of London. Inside sat Prince William and his wife Catherine. Both were dressed in dark colors. William wore his military uniform with shining medals on his chest. Catherine had chosen a simple black dress with a small hat. Her face looked serious but calm. The morning was cold and gray. Thick clouds covered the sky like a heavy blanket. The air felt different today. People on the streets stopped walking when they saw the royal car passing by. Some waved quietly. Others just stood and watched with respect in their eyes. William looked out of the window. His hands were folded in his lap. His mind was thinking about the day ahead. This was not going to be an easy visit. The memorial they were going to see was special. It held the names of soldiers who had died fighting for their country. Many of these soldiers were young men and women who would never come home to their families. Catherine noticed her husband was quiet. She could see the worry in his eyes. She knew this visit meant a lot to him. William had been a soldier too. He understood what it meant to serve and protect. He knew the fear that soldiers felt. He also knew the courage they showed every day. The car turned into a street lined with old trees. Their branches were bare because winter was coming. The leaves had fallen and covered the ground like a brown carpet. Everything looked peaceful but sad at the same time. As they got closer to the memorial, more people appeared on the streets. Families walked together holding flowers. Some carried small flags. Others held old photographs of loved ones. These were the families of the fallen soldiers. They had come to remember and honor their heroes. William straightened his uniform. He checked his medals one more time. Each medal told a story of service and duty. Today he would wear them with extra pride. Not for himself, but for all the brave men and women whose names were written on the memorial walls. Catherine adjusted her hat and smoothed her dress. She knew that cameras would be watching every move they made. But more importantly, she knew that families would be watching too. Families who had lost someone precious. She wanted to show them respect and kindness. The car slowed down as they reached the memorial gates. Through the windows, they could see a large crowd waiting. People of all ages stood together. There were elderly couples holding hands, young mothers with children, teenagers who looked serious and grown up, veterans in their old uniforms with pride shining in their eyes. The memorial itself was beautiful and powerful. Tall stone walls reached toward the sky. On these walls were thousands of names carved in perfect letters. Each name represented a life. Each name had a story. Each name belonged to someone who was loved and missed. William took a deep breath. His heart felt heavy, but also full of purpose. He knew that today was about more than just showing up. It was about honoring memory. It was about comforting those who grieve. It was about showing that sacrifice is never forgotten. Catherine reached over and gently touched his hand. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her touch said everything. It said, "I am here with you." It said, "We will do this together." It said, "You are not alone." The car came to a complete stop. The driver got out and walked around to open their door. William looked at Catherine one more time. She gave him a small nod and a soft smile. It was time to begin. They stepped out of the car together. The cold air hit their faces immediately. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the children stopped talking. Everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. William and Catherine walked side by side toward the memorial entrance. Their footsteps echoed on the stone path. Each step brought them closer to a day that would touch hearts across the entire nation.